Hi, how are you? I hope you always healthy. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I would like to continue our discussion about the moon on flat earth. This is the truth. I will tell the truth. It's painful, but better to get hurt by the truth than comforted with a lie. Before I start it, remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon on my channel if you enjoy. And also, share this information to your family, your friends, and everyone. I can't speak, I had speech disorder. So, I am sorry to use robot voice on the video. Many people complain about this. But now, I had buy a better speech software with good voice. I also put the text on the video, so you can read them if you're not comfortable with this voice. So, here we go. The lunar eclipse is a tough nut to crack, and this video will start going a bit deeper now, so sit down and strap in. This section will be explained slowly and clearly, even with some repetition, because the concept has never been explained about or talked of before. NASA has since the 1960s have taken no photos or videos from space of a lunar eclipse. This is because satellites and spacecraft are a hoax, and nothing has gone past 100 kilometers in altitude. NASA with all their money and spaceships just give us a diagram and CGI, so we need to forget all of this hogwash, and go back to ancient myth. In the Edda, an ancient collection of Scandinavian poetry, embodying the national mythology, Managarmr is the monster who sometimes swallows up the moon, and stains the heaven and the air with blood. One of the most terrible phenomena to heathens was an eclipse of the sun or moon, which they associated with a destruction of all things and the end of the world. I may safely assume that the same superstitious notions and practices attend eclipses among nations ancient and modern. The Indian belief is that a serpent eats up the sun and moon when they are eclipsed, or a demon devours them. To this day, the Hindus consider that a giant lays hold of the luminaries and tries to swallow them. The Chinese call the solar eclipse Zishi, Solis Divaratio, the lunar Yushi, Lun Divaratio, and ascribe them both to the machinations of a dragon. Nearly all the populations of northern Asia hold the same opinion. The Finns of Europe, the Lithuanians, and the Moors in Africa have a similar belief. By Grimm's Teutonic mythology, an eclipse of the moon filled them with dismay. They supposed the planet was Nachua, or under the influence of the spell of some evil spirit that was destroying it. Hence they repaired to the temple, and offered prayers for the moon's release. By mariners natives of the Tonga Islands. The common notion amongst ignorant Mohammedans is that an eclipse is caused by some evil spirit catching hold of the sun or moon. On such occasions, in eastern towns, the whole population assembles with pots, pans, and other equally rude instruments of music, and, with the aid of their lungs, make a din and turmoil which might suffice to drive away a whole army of evil spirits, even at so great a distance. By discoveries in the ruins of Nineveh and Babylon, 1853. There are scores more myths about the lunar eclipse, but they all seem to state the same two things. Firstly, a lunar eclipse is believed to be devoured by some evil demon, or by wolves or dogs. This is the superstitious vagary of the Hindus, the Chinese, Asians, Europeans, Africans, Americans, and Polynesians. Secondly, a lunar eclipse is the precursor of some dreadful calamity to the inhabitants of the earth. These notions are also traceable in every quarter of the earth. Rahu and Ketu are mentioned in the Vedas, and their meanings since Vedic times have not remained static, as we will present in due course. Commonly they are known as invisible celestial bodies, shadow planets, black suns, that interact with the sun and moon. These demons are said to wreak vengeance on the sun and moon whenever they come near. The head of this great demon snake is known as Rahu, and his tail is known as Ketu. The Mahabharata from India, Bhisma Parva 13. Verse 39-45, uses both Svarbhanu and Rahu as interchangeable names. Rahu is a graha, 12,000 yojanas in diameter, bigger than both the moon, about 11,000 yojanas, and the sun, about 10,000 yojanas. Rahu had to be bigger than the sun and the moon, so that it could grab them. Note that the term graha here carries the sense of a grabber, and not that of a body in orbit. In more modern times they became simply deities for the lunar nodes. Note, the lunar eclipse only occurs when the moon is full, and on an opposite phase node to the sun. Please watch the node section in early chapter in my playlist for the simple phase node explanation. Mainstream science tells us that the lunar eclipse occurs when the moon and sun are on opposite nodes, and then the spherical Earth casts a shadow onto the spherical moon from the sunlight behind the Earth, from a spherical sun. This can be experienced as a partial lunar eclipse, or a total lunar eclipse, or a faint penumbral eclipse, each depending on the accuracy of the three spheres lining up. Mainstream science says, this doesn't happen every month, because the three spherical objects are not lined up fully, not accurate enough placement at the nodes. In the flat Earth model, this mainstream indoctrination is all hogwash, as we have proven in earlier chapters. They also say it only happens on a full moon and at night. This is true within the flat Earth model. In recent years, the term and label blood moon has become popular when referring to total lunar eclipses, due to the moon turning fiery red in the middle stage of the lunar eclipse. The mainstream model falls down on so many levels, as you should already know by now. Here is a video of a lunar eclipse occurring with the sun rising. Ignore the globe head in the video, as his eyes are under hypnosis from his controlled mind.
It's now about 7:04 a.m. and we'll try to show you how we cannot see anything, but through the stacks of the refinery back there, we can just barely make out a little bit of the moon left. It's about 2/3 of the way covered with Earth shadow, and it's turning a sort of pale orange, pinkish color. But with the bright morning sun coming up, there's not enough contrast to be able to see the moon there. We can still see it just a little bit. What I find very interesting is I was expecting the shadow to come upward across the moon as it would go down and it would pass into shadow, and actually it's going the other way around. The shadow, as the moon is here, the shadow is creeping down across the moon, even though the sun's coming up over here, and that must be because of the moon's rotation around the Earth. It's moving farther up, even though the sun's light is actually coming from over there. It's actually coming underneath the Earth. So if you imagine, the sun is here, the Earth is here, and the moon is back here, and this light was coming under the Earth, but the moon must be rotating around even though we're turning, so it looks like the moon is going down. It's kind of an optical illusion. It's pretty cool.
Here are a few quotes to add some more weight. The Newtonian hypothesis involves the necessity of the sun, in the case of a lunar eclipse, being on the opposite side of a globular Earth, to cast its shadow on the moon, but, since eclipses of the moon have taken place with both the sun and the moon above the horizon, it follows that it cannot be the shadow of the Earth that eclipses the moon, and that the theory is a blunder. By William Carpenter, 100 Proofs the Earth is not a globe. That the eclipser of the moon is a shadow at all is assumption, no proof whatever is offered. That the moon receives her light from the sun, and that therefore, her surface is darkened by the Earth. Intercepting the sun's light is not proved. It is not proved that the Earth moves in an orbit round the sun, and therefore, by being in different positions, conjunction of sun, Earth, and moon, day sometimes occur. The contrary has been clearly proved, that the moon is not eclipsed by a shadow, that she is self-luminous, and not merely a reflector of solar light, and therefore, could not possibly be obscured, or eclipsed by a shadow from any object whatever, and that the Earth is devoid of motion, either on axis, or in an orbit through space. Hence to call that an argument for the Earth's rotundity, where every necessary proposition is only assumed, and in relation to which direct and practical evidence to the contrary is abundant, is to stultify the judgment and every other reasoning faculty. By Dr. Samuel Robotham, Zetetic Astronomy, Earth Not a Globe. According to the globular theory, a lunar eclipse occurs when the Sun, Earth, and Moon are in a direct line, but it is on record that since about the 15th century over 50 eclipses have occurred, while both Sun and Moon have been visible above the horizon. By F. H. Cook, The Terrestrial Plane. The Greenwich Royal Observatory recorded that during the lunar eclipses of July 17, 1590, November 3, 1648, June 16, 1666, and May 26, 1668, the Moon rose eclipsed whilst the Sun was still above the horizon. Mkaluch's geography recorded that on September 20, 1717 and April 20, 1837, the Moon appeared to rise eclipsed before the Sun had set. Sir Henry Holland also noted in his Recollections of Past Life the April 20, 1837, phenomena where the Moon rose eclipsed before the Sun set. The Daily Telegraph recorded it happening again on January 17, 1870, then again in July of the same year, and it continues to happen during lunar eclipses to this day. As before stated, the Earth is proved to be a plane, without motion, and always several hundred miles below the Sun and Moon, and cannot, by any known possibility, come between them. It cannot, therefore, intercept the light of the Sun, and throw its own shadow upon the Moon. If such a thing were a natural possibility, how could the Moon continue to shine during the whole, or any considerable part of the period of its passage through the dark shadow of the Earth? Refraction, or what has been called Earth light, will not aid in the explanation, because the light of the Moon is at such times like the glowing heat of fire tinged with deep red. Reddish is not the word to express it, it was red, red hot. The reddish light made it seem to be on fire. It looked like a fire smoldering in its ashes. Its tint was that of red-hot copper. The sunlight is of an entirely different color to that of the eclipsed Moon, and it is contrary to known optical principles to say that light when refracted or reflected, or both simultaneously, is thereby changed in color. If a light of a given color is seen through a great depth of a comparatively dense medium, as the Sun is often seen in winter through the fog and vapor of the atmosphere, it appears of a different color, and generally of such as that which the Moon so often gives during a total eclipse, but a shadow cannot produce any such effect, as it is, in fact, not an entity at all, but simply the absence of light. By Zetetic Astronomy, Samuel Burley Robotham, 1881. So again, we have to go back to a blank canvas, and really note what we see with our eyes regarding the lunar eclipse. We see the Moon illuminate, go fiery red, and then illuminate. Sometimes it illuminates fully, sometimes only a little, depending on its accuracy to the Sun at the other phenode. The lunar eclipse event cannot be from the Sun's light in any way, whether it is direct sunlight refracting around the Earth's atmosphere, or sunlight somehow bending around the Earth's atmosphere. Why? Because we are on a flat Earth model. So, what is going on? What is making the Moon turn black and red? And why does everyone assume it is a shadow of some kind? Again, we can somewhat crudely place a lunar eclipse viewing area onto the flat Earth model. Note, the dark blue and red signifies 100% visible, and the light blue and white signifies 0% visible. This is from a recent lunar eclipse. Hopefully you have noticed that there is a massive viewing area of the lunar eclipse compared to the solar eclipse. This is important as we shall present. So what is truly going on? It is true that there are 3 lunar events we can experience: a total, partial, and a faint de-illumination or shadowing of the moon, with the moon turning a fiery blood red in the middle of a total de-illumination or shadowing. Lunar eclipses look the same to all who can see them, and are seen at the same time, even if these people are thousands of miles apart. This is different to the solar eclipse. Lunar eclipses have all the characteristics of the source of light losing its power and changing its own color. Before you turn off the video, please hold on and watch further. I will take it slowly. A lunar eclipse is seen wherever it's nighttime. If it were the case that the moon is obstructed by another celestial body, Rahu, Ketu, shadow planet, Mount Meru, black sun, Lilith, we would have seen the same phenomena as in the case of the solar eclipse, only visible in a small location. A lunar eclipse may be viewed from any place on Earth that is in darkness, at night. Lunar eclipses last for a few hours, much longer than the minutes of the solar eclipse. They are completely different events. As the lunar eclipses are seen over a massive land space and at the same intensity, it would mean that any obstructing body would be huge, many times bigger than the moon, and if this were the case, then the stars which are situated in a large portion of the sky, surrounding the moon would be eclipsed as well. But that is not the case, and only the moon is affected. Note, here I am, a firm believer that all the stars are above the moon, but the wandering stars, planets, are much lower and some may come very rarely in front of the moon. If it were Mount Meru at the North Pole creating the shadow, another theory being bandied about, or the black sun, Rahu etc., it simply would be too huge. YouTube videos and forums that spout these sorts of diagrams have not thought it through enough, because this would affect our sight to the moon and sky at other times of the month. Even daily it would cause a visual experience that we just don't witness. The change in color during a lunar eclipse is seen simultaneously by people in different continents, and because of this, the obstruction theory is impossible. Rahu and Ketu we will sort out soon enough. They do hold relevance to the sun and moon, but we must proceed with the lunar eclipse explanation. This event only occurs at a full moon. Why? Since the Earth is flat, we already know that the phases of the moon are not caused by the shadow of the Earth or from the sun's light. But lunar eclipses never happen during the other phases of the moon. No partial, penumbral, or total eclipse of the moon occurs. There is no moon eclipse when the moon is not full. Why is this? There are no eclipses because during the other phases of the moon is actually eclipsed but not by another celestial body, but by itself. It just loses its power, and it does exactly the same thing when it's a full moon sometimes, when the sun and moon are both at opposite phase nodes, when the sun has more of an energetic link to it. An aspect in astrological terms. Only when it illuminates and de-illuminates in the space of a few hours do people call it a lunar eclipse. When the moon illuminates and de-illuminates more slowly, people call it phases. During the phases period, which last a long time, the moon is not obstructed by anything, and it illuminates and de-illuminates. During the lunar eclipse period, which lasts a shorter time, the moon is not obstructed by anything, and it also illuminates and de-illuminates. The moon also turns a fiery, blood red. This is it sparking, trying to regain its power. It has its link to the sun in geometric alignment at this time via the phase nodes, and it wants to regain its power. It is fully illuminated, full moon, aligned to the sun, and it is the best and only time for it to spark or jolt or surge its power. It's the time when it's energetically linked to the Sun in a geometric aspect, and highly probably at exactly the same height. We saw earlier the Moon and or Sun's altitude has to vary slightly. What's this about the Moon losing power, regaining power, surging in power, sparking in power? The next full chapter will go into this thesis alone, as for sure it needs some way to back up this claim. For now we must continue with the lunar eclipse. Because both the solar and lunar events are both labeled eclipses, people automatically think they are similar events, but it's misleading. They are completely different events. Another major key in all of this is, what happens to the Moon just before and just after it turns red. A small portion of the Moon starts to illuminate much brighter than it was the previous minutes, hours, and even days. The first illuminating portion of the Moon after the red color of the Moon shines really bright. The last illuminating portion of the Moon just before the red color of the Moon also shines really bright. Before the red experience, this bright illuminated portion gets bigger and brighter. Then the whole Moon gets illuminated and then it turns red. It is like it is rebooting itself, or surging in power, or energetically handshaking with the Sun across at the other phase node. An obstructing object, Rahu etc., simply cannot do this. Watch these 2 time-lapse videos of the lunar event, and let go of what you've been taught. What is really happening? Watch passively with your eyes and not your mind. The Moon is losing power, or preparing energy, retracting, and then sparks, surges, pulses, red, then regains power. This could be seen as the Moon simply malfunctioning, akin to a broken electronic gadget. It looks like a malfunctioning spotlight that has short-circuited, and it's blinking or flickering. It seems to be a small reset of an already malfunctioning device. Remember, this event only happens on a full moon, already powered up, and when the Sun is in a geometric alignment, and within phase node alignment, energy can be shared between the Sun and Moon, akin to a super tight and accurate astrological opposition aspect. Also, really think about these images, and the labels you have used all your life. On the left is a photo of the Moon in phase, and on the right is a photo of a lunar eclipse. There is no difference in the core of both events, the Moon just illuminates in both instances. The flat Earth lunar eclipse is simply a pranic, or electromagnetic, handshake between the Sun and Moon, creating the Moon to go through all its phases.
And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole, from Little Mark. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.